closest in my circle? Who the one who be the snakes? Who gon' fold up under pressure? Who gon' understand the stakes? Who gon' wait to get their food to try to take from off my plate? Who the love? Who gon' understand I'm hurt? Who gon' love me unconditionally and try to make it work? Who gon' party once I'm gone and shed a tear once I'm in dirt? I ain't asking for too much, I'm trying to understand my worth.
Welcome to the next episode of Give Me My Crown podcast.
Give Me My Crown podcast.
And once again, my name is Antonio.
My name's Keith.
And then today we got one of our good friends on with us. We'll let him go ahead and introduce himself.
My name is Kevin Wilson.
All right. So today we brought Kevin on. We'll talk about a lot of different. We can go through a lot of different topics. Me and Kevin was in the same unit in the military together, so we're gonna go from kind of how he went from there to kind of where he is now, and the journey he took to get there, and any trials and tribulations he had to fight, anything he had to go through in order to get to where he's at now.
Y'all was in the same unit together? I didn't know that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
not the same squad or platoon, but we was in the same unit.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. Man, that was a long time ago. You're taking me back every time I see you, man.
I
It's
know.
true. Yeah, man. Was it I guess when my start was how I broke into it was when I went off to college. I went to Liberty University in Lynchburg, and while I was there, was it we had campus. It cost so much to be at the campus. Like it was somewhere right around on the numbers. It was somewhere right around $4,000 to $5,000 a semester to stay on campus. And when we start running the numbers, we start thinking to ourselves like, I come from Danville, Virginia, where rent is like it used to be $400, $500,
Yeah.
$600. If $700 if you was in a really good neighborhood. And so with having that mindset and seeing that I was basically paying almost $5,000 because it was somewhere in between 4 and 5, but it was closer to that 5, I'm sure. And so I saw that number. I actually start, trying to get people to go in on actually going to a rental property out in Lynchburg and actually commuting over into Lynchburg. And as I was talking to them about getting a rental property, we had really started to make some wave into getting a rental property to save money on tuition and board. So at that point, we went from us going to talk to to one of the dads that got involved, and this is when he hit us off with, hey, yeah, if y'all really on to getting a rental property, let me tell you what I'm gonna do for y'all. I'm gonna buy a house and y'all rent the house out. So one of the kids' dad had not kids, because we was all adults, we was in college, we was 18, but young men, and he was like, hey, I want all of y'all to pay me $500 each, which 4 months in a semester typically. So you're talking about $2,000, and you basically cutting everything in half. And now I get my own room. Yeah, we still had the same living room, but we had 2 bathrooms in the house. We had found a 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom house. So each one was going in $500 a month. So that's four of us, me and myself included. That's $2,000. The house was only like $100,000 house. Now I didn't pay attention. I pay attention to numbers truly, but that's where it threw me off. Like, man, this dude is ready to pocket in a lot of cash because the mortgage was like $600. It
Hey.
was nothing, but he was paying the mortgage. He was paying everything. He did include the utilities in with it, but regardless, he was still going to make a killing or whatever and everything off the deal because he was making over $1,000 on the deal, and he was still paying utilities and still paying the mortgage. So that kind of opened my mind to my first little taste, which I wasn't even actually doing it. I was just renting the property, and then it opened my mind from when I first got my first house. So I ended up I dropped out of college, dropped out of Liberty University after being there for one semester, just because my stepfather and my mom had kind of split, and when they split, it was kind of like, hey, my mom needed me to buckle down and start using some of my money to help home because I've always helped home, but She needed me really to focus on home. So and plus my sister, she was very young, so we needed her to go ahead and graduate high school so she could focus on school. So my mom downsized, and I told my mom, hey, I was in between jobs. I was working 4 jobs while I was in Liberty University.
Dang.
So
At one time?
yeah, I know. Yeah, at one time. Yeah, that,
How
that
you
was
doing
crazy. I was working
schoolwork
at
and working 4 jobs, man? That's crazy.
Man, I know what you're saying. It is crazy, but I had because I was paying for college, man. I got a scholarship. I had an honors GPA, but and so they give you some grant money and they give you a little bit of scholarships to help with expenses or whatever and everything. But it doesn't cover it all. I'm sure you already know. So to not go into debt so much and not really having credit established and not no one to lean to co-sign for me, I needed to pay for school. So that's when I kind of leaned towards was it? I remember I worked at the mall and because I worked at Go Games and Calendar Club. So this is a split on that. How I was working 2 jobs is I was actually working at Go Games and Calendar Club at the same time. So, so I'm running this kiosk and I'm running this kiosk and I put them like right beside each other, right? And so I just got myself spinning around working this cash register, working that cash register at the same time, which was crazy, but they didn't know. I mean, it worked. It worked on all ends. And I was still working at I was actually working at Liberty for Sodexo. I was working in the catering, doing the food kind of like it does at Procter and Gamble. And then the other job I had was I worked at it's called Kickback Jacks now, but it was called Rocco Little Cafe then. So I was working all these jobs trying to pay for schooling, and my mom said, "Hey, I need you to help me out." So she was working on getting our high school diploma at the time. So I came home and I left a lot of jobs when I left that area, but I only had my job from Rockola Cafe, and I needed more cash, but I also wanted to go to school. The ticker that you always hear at school was the way to get out of poverty. Get an education, get a higher wage, and everything. So I always had that in the back of my head. So I needed to get back, so I needed a way to pay for school. So I did transfer to the mall in Danville and was working in Calendar Club at Danville, so I kept 2 jobs then. So then when I kept that job, I went over to what's the place called? To the recruiting office, and the recruiter was like, "Hey, you want to go to school?" Because I was talking to somebody else about going back to school, and he was like, "You want to go to school?" Because he was just walking through. They always walking through trying to
Yeah.
recruit people and everything, and they're in their uniform. But this was actually the Air Force, and calendar club is a seasonal job, so it only comes in a certain season. And so on the real job I had was it Rockola Cafe, but Rockola Cafe hours was real funny because they eventually shut down, but they just really changed the name because they went under new management. But it was some funny stuff going on. So I talked to the recruiter and he was like, "Hey man, we'll pay for your school." And so I was just like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 man, we got the GI Bill and then we got some other stuff, and you come with us or whatever and everything." So I'm talking to the Air Force at the point, and then the Air Force was like, "It's gonna take you 6 months to a year to go through our processing, and then you'll finally, get started." So at this point, I'm like, "Man, I need to go now." So when I have my mind made up about something, it don't. I'm rushing it. It's funny because I move slow up until that point, and then all of a sudden it's like you didn't open this idea, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. So Air Force told me 6 months to a year. The Army told me 3 months to 6 months. The Navy told me the same amount of time. In the Marine Corps, I walked into the office, and they said, "Hey, man, you can leave Monday."
Dang.
So I was like, "All right, let's do it. Let's go, let's go." He was like, but he said, "Hold on, hold on, hold on. I'm jumping the gun. Can you pass all the fitness tests and everything and stuff like that?" So I blew all that out of the water. I was an athlete. I was constantly playing basketball, constantly running, just constantly going down to the city auditorium in my local town. They used to hoop there all the time. So I was constantly playing at the Squire Armory, around Army vets all the time, playing all the time. So I was slightly in shape. So at that point, I joined the military, and I learned a lot of stuff in the military. That you had the VA, housing. You could do several different things, but I guess people don't explain exactly what you can do. So the first opportunity I got when I first bought my first house, was that I started working at this place called IKEA, and I was in the reserve at the time, and I was actually getting a divorce, so I was working out a custody battle with my working out custody. So I needed a home, and I needed certain things to look, exceptional to the court system to make sure they know I'm taking this, I'm legitly very established. So I had my savings account stacked up because I just got back from Afghanistan from one of my tours, and I had money stacked up, and I also was in the process of buying a house. Now I bought the house, but just like that guy did for 100,000 when I was at college, and you know what? I said to myself, let me rent out my rooms, just like he did, like we was talking about doing. So I rented out the rooms for it sounds kind of funny, but I rented out the rooms for 25% of someone's income.
Okay.
Okay.
And so, and this is how it kind of pumped up the cash a little bit more because I was a supervisor at a place called IKEA, and the people who worked under me was my roommates. And so I was directly reflection of them actually working overtime. Like, hey, you want to work this weekend? I got you, put you down for overtime. And so they would be down for overtime, and it would pump their wages up, would in turn pump my income up in the 25%.
Yo.
So, so it was like, hey man, go and get that OT, man. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. And it was all about it. I was like, yeah, yeah, let's get it, let's get it. And low key in my head, I'm like, yeah, yeah, let's get it. It's pumping up the rent even more because it's 25. I know exactly what they make. I knew I saw the picture, so it's 25. That's why it worked so well. And that went on for like a year. Well, I saved up enough money. Well, it went on for a while, and I had enough money saved up because a lot of things people don't know about the GI Bill. Like you don't have to put a down payment. So I had it in my head when I was going to buy my house, I was going to drop a down payment, and I had well over enough to drop a down payment, but I kept getting denied by banks of the process, and not sure of why I got denied. Because when they send out letters, they say generic reasons. They say things like, hey, you was delinquent on an account, and you was this, you was that, and they never gave it a breakdown. Even when they said I was delinquent, I know it had been like 3 years since I missed any bill, so I just didn't understand it enough.
Yeah.
So I got with this guy. I tell people this all the time: when you're driving around and you see a company with mortgage on the title, like stop by there, see what they offer, and see if you can work deals out with them. Because 9 times out of 10, they're a third party lender. And a lot of people don't know that. As a third party lender, what they do is what the banks are not willing to do.
Yep.
So when you go to Wells Fargo or Bank of America, they're trying to approve you based on their underwriter system of a cookie cutter. Hey, this is how you are to buying a house. You meet all the criteria. They pass it on to the underwriters. They give you the pre-approval pretty easily if you just approve that way. But when they start digging in, the underwriters is what get you approved. Well, the guy I went to, his name was Ed Irvin. He was coming from Cross Country Mortgage, and he took me under his wing pretty well. He was like, "Hey man, you do this, 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 and this. I don't care what the banks are saying. We'll get you approved for a loan. We'll approve you ourselves." So they approved me for a loan through Cross Country Mortgage, and I got the loan, worked it all out. And what I found out later on, what's funny is these places typically sell their mortgage off to
Yep.
someone else.
Yep.
And the very people who denied me, Wells Fargo, is the people who picked up my loan. So in the end, I had to pay my mortgage to them anyway.
So, question:
So
quick question, when you bought
yeah,
your first house, I know you said you rented out the rooms to people you work with. Did you also live there?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, house hacking.
And did you
Yeah,
use the
yeah. So
did you use the VA loan on that first house?
yeah, I
Okay.
used the VA. Yeah, yeah. So on the VA, I didn't have to put no money down. I did have to pay closing costs. But what I did was Ed he kind of, I was he took me on his wing, like I said. He said, let's talk to them about getting them to pay the closing costs, so you don't come nothing out of pocket. And that's what people don't know, what's in their bargaining chip to getting the buyer, I mean the seller, to pay closing costs. And a lot of times you kind of flex it on, hey, I'll pay what you're asking for and not a dime less if you go ahead and pay all the closing to get this deal closed out. So now I didn't have to pay a down payment. I didn't have to pay closing costs. So all the money I had saved up, I had it basically sitting, waiting on the second house shortly after. And then going into that, like I said, I got a divorce. I basically gave her everything. I gave her everything. And so in that process, she um I had nothing, and me and my son were just starting off. So it allowed me to build up everything that I had because I was just, furniture, everything. So I was using it and, growing the place or whatever and everything. And so after I got everything I needed, had the whole house fully furnished. Later on, it was almost like the college life at the house because it was the refrigerator stayed full with alcohol, and we was always partying all the time, and I was just like, hey man, we got to stop this, man. This got to clean up a little bit. You can't just keep doing this. And at the point, after you mingle so many times, you meet the women that you meet, and that's when at that point when I was dating, I met my wife. And so she had kind of moved in at that point. Certain rent tenants, we start moving those out until we basically went to just us living at the house at that time. Me, my son, and my wife,
And is this
and
still
we
your
had
first
moved
house?
everybody. Yeah, yeah, still just my
Okay.
first house. So I got a taste of the income coming in and having the power of not really. I didn't have to pay a mortgage. I didn't have to pay my utility bill. I didn't have to pay the cable bill, the internet bill. I was basically just living good. And plus, I almost had two jobs almost the whole time I was out. Even when I would never take a vacation. Every time I would take a vacation from my job, because I was in the reserve at the time, I would actually switch over and work at the unit and take vacation from my actual job, from my job at IKEA. So I was like always doubling up on the paychecks or whatever and everything to make sure that I was well, moving the process forward. And when income is income based, when you're trying to get another house, it makes it real hard because they see that as a liability.
Yeah.
Um, and so they saw my house payment and they was like, "Hey, yeah, you make X amount of dollars, but that's pushing you towards the higher percentile of debt to income ratio." And at that point, was it on month to month transactions? And so I wanted to get another house. I wanted to get one pretty bad. So what I did was I actually went and talked to Ed all over again, cross country mortgage all over again. And Ed was like, "Hey man, you can get another house. This is what you have to do." And he said, "You have He said I told him about my wife, which was my fiance at the time, and he was like, are you planning on marrying her?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm spending the rest of my life with her." And he was like, "So here's something funny you can do in there, right? You can buy a house in her name." And I was just like, "What? I could buy a house in her name? I don't know. That sounds kind of weird." He was like, "Hey man, you're gonna marry her, right? Think about it. You're gonna marry her." So let me tell you a story about, and this is, I'm not trying to get out of a wedding. Let me just tell you that for, front, right? So my wife, um, we was trying to get married, and we was going through the process of getting ready to get married, and we went over to one of the mansions, Belmont Mansion, and they basically told us how much everything would cost, right? And they said, "Hey," and I still have a lot of money saved up because you know was it I didn't have to put so much down on the first house. And so I was thinking to myself, how do I let me just go out and say it and just leave the door open to her. After we would start looking at the wedding arrangements, it almost racked up to just exclude them and was it just the housing, the facility we was going to use, and the cake, and the tent and the chairs, everything, all of that. And it did work out the food. Everything was brought in with the food. It was going to be like 13, 14 grand. So me and myself, I'm thinking to myself, $13,000 to $14,000 for a wedding, and I know that's different numbers for everybody, but I was
Yeah.
just like, man, we ain't even talking about the dress. I already paid X amount of dollars for the wedding band, the wedding ring, and all this other stuff. I'm like, I'm just seeing the numbers racking up, and I'm just seeing my savings dwindling down. So I went to my wife, and I was just like, you know what? This is your day. You know, I'll marry you any kind of way. You know, this is your thought. Hey, I can have it either other way. But I tell you this, how about this? If you don't have a wedding and I'll buy you a house. My wife looked at me. We'll talk about this later. And so, flash forward a week later. Was it her you know how when they setting up wedding arrangements, they get into it with the best the groom, and they get, I mean, not with the groom, they get into it with the maids of honor, which is her cousin. They was upset getting the wedding arrangements. She saw all the frustration of everything that was going on, and it was really clinching down. And we really ain't really even got into it just yet. She was looking up cakes and looking up this. So if we did use a different venue, and then she said she got into it with her family because her family was saying basically the wedding. I'm gonna have to fly people down. I'm gonna have to fly people down here or from El Salvador. My wife is from El Salvador. Well, she's not from El Salvador. Her people are from El Salvador. She's from New York. So I would have to fly some of her people from El Salvador to be at the wedding. And I'm just like, man, this is racking on up.
Yeah.
But then my wife was upset with one of her relatives, and she was just like, you know what? And it was causing too much turmoil. Then she came to me. She was like, no, I don't even want a wedding. Let's go ahead and go to the Justice of Peace, and you go ahead and buy me the house. I kept my composure and I held it in. And when I got out of the room from her, I was out there celebrating like I don't know what. And so yeah, we went to Justice of Peace. Was it and we got married. And but before we had got married, I went on and bought a house in her name. And so then she had her house. That was my second house or whatever. And later on, it got put into both our names, because we got married and everything. So that worked out pretty smooth. And she got first home buyers credits. A lot of people don't know that.
So
That first home buyer credit can go ahead.
that second house, what kind of loan did you use to buy that house?
FHA.
FHA. Okay.
FHA loan. Yeah, so I had to put 3.5% down. And it actually was just a little bit more because the house was on a borderline. A lot of banks, they have like a borderline of money they'll finance you for a house.
Yeah.
And so if you hit right on the borderline, a lot of times they say 3.5, but it actually ranges up just a little bit more than the 3.5. So it'd be 3.5 as a start, and then like fees. Like a lot of people don't know about the fees that they tell you, like getting appraisal done, getting inspections done, getting a termite inspection. A lot of that's part of the closing, but you can't trim those prices down.
Yeah.
Those prices are almost set in stone. And typically, I've always seen those prices float anywhere between 500 to 1,000 in our area for
Yeah.
those costs.
So with that second house, did y'all live in that one and rent the first one out, or did y'all continue to live in the first one and rent the
Yeah.
second one out?
No, we moved into the first one. Plus, that was my kind of like the first one was kind of like my bachelor career.
Yeah.
And my wife didn't like all the demons of that house, and so she was like, let's move out of this house and go into another house and start our own or whatever and everything. So small house, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, with a fully open basement. And that's where I really kind of broke into doing my own renovations. We kept trying to get contractors to come by the house, and they would always give us the runaround. Like one guy who was like a pastor, and I'm not gonna say his name, but he told us he'll do the work for us, and we paid him half the money, 50% up front, and then 50% afterwards. So he came by the house and he started to do the work. And when I say started, all he did was clean and get himself prepped up, which prep is big, right? And then the next day he didn't show up. He
Dang.
didn't show up no more after that.
Did y'all leave
Yeah,
y'all's
yeah.
money back?
So No,
Dang.
no, man. We
Wow.
didn't get our money back. I saw him a few times, but I always, I'm real funny about that, right? Like I said, it's a life lesson. Hey, yeah, you burnt me this time, but now you just made me sharper for the next person, you
I
know?
like
Exactly.
that.
And so, I didn't, yeah, I didn't ran into a lot of scenarios where I'd have been burnt, where I didn't get paid, and all it does is alter me. So to bring it all back, I start doing, even Lowe's had got me.
Wow.
Lowe's that got the mess out of me. Yeah, because people don't know. People don't know. Lowe's don't actually do the work,
Yeah, they
right?
contracted
They
out.
contracted out, and I didn't know that. So I'm like, Lowe's is going to knock this out. They're super professional, and so I signed a contract. And what people don't know that Lowe's make you pay all up front,
Yep.
and so which I was okay with it because I thought I was going to get the job done. So we did that for a basement remodel, and so we had basically put a bedroom, put a living room, a washer and dryer room, and a bathroom. And so I did most of the work with the help of a few guys who, showed me how to do a little bit of carpentry. Um, I went to school for electrical because when I was in the military, when I was in Afghanistan, there was a guy who we had at the FOB, and while he was there, he came out. He was deployed. He came with us over there, not with us, but he was over there while he was there. And he would be there for 6 months and make like $200,000 in
Yep.
his 6 months,
Wow.
and spend 6 months at home. So when I learned that, I was just like, man, what's going on? I need to become an electrician. I'm not taking anything. And so when I went back to use the GI Bill, um, I went back for electrical. That's what I went for. I went to my local community college, and took up electrical. So to flash forward, I'm there. I did a lot of my electrical work because everything I learned through school theory and all that good stuff like that. And so I had permits through Danville, and the inspectors was coming out checking the work out, all permitted work, and I got Lowe's to come over there and do work for me. And this is what burnt me out the most. Lowe's charged me right around 15 grand to do my bathroom, nothing else, just bathroom alone. And as we're doing the bathroom, they didn't show up. They said in 90 days they'll start, and within 90 days they'll finish. 90 days passed, they didn't start.
Wow.
Another 90 days passed, they didn't start. Another 90 days passed, they didn't start again. So we had got to the point where we had a whole year lapse and nothing has started. So at this point, still learning, still getting a feel for life. Hey, I'm telling people my story, and they're like, man, you can go to Lowe's and cause a fuss. If I knew what I knew now, I would have.
Yeah.
but but I didn't. So I actually went to the school. Went to Lowe's, and I was like, "Hey, this is ridiculous. I've been waiting. Y'all still haven't got started. So you know what? I want my money back. Like I want something needs to happen." So they basically told me, "Hey, anything you want in Lowe's, 50% off. Anything you want, no matter where it's at. Anything you want, 50% off." At this point, I'm trying to question how much money I have because I need to buy almost everything that I'm gonna ever do to the future of everything. So I was in there buying tubs. I was telling cousins, uncles, and everything, hey, y'all need anything? I can get it to y'all for the low. Whatever you need, I can get it for you for the low. How much did they low? Go to Lowe's, you see the price. I knock something off of it, at least 25%. So everybody was coming to me saying, hey man, can you get this? Can you get that? I upsold a lot of stuff to bring in some more income or whatever and everything. And at that point, was it but Lowe's took so long of getting things knocked out. I actually started doing some of the work. And when they did show up, I was working third shift, and it's hard to sleep when they're in the house, doing all the work that they're doing. So I would just be sitting there watching them, because I ain't ready to sleep. I'm sitting there watching them do work, and I'm like, man, is that all the plumbing was? I could do plumbing. Is that all that y'all doing as far as tile? Shoot, I should be able to do some tile if we leveling it out and everything. I can level something out. So I started looking what tools they had. Any contractor that came by the house, I'm hawking it, checking what I can actually, tools I can acquire over the years. I'm even telling my family members, but for some reason they still be buying me clothes, and they never buy me the right size. So it just kind of just messes with me every time they do it. But I'm seeing on what tools I can buy, and so I'm like, hey, let me get this tool, let me get that tool, and building my arsenal to get ready for whatever work. And when comeback engineer 1371, we worked around a lot of tools already. We was building the hooches. We was building the fobs up. We was doing HESCO berms. We was doing excavating. We was doing a lot of work out there to build the fobs, to build the base. And so you got hands-on work. Matter of fact, we in school, in comeback engineering school, we'd actually put roofing together
Yeah.
and learn, take classes on tooling. So it's not like I was a stranger to it. So at this point, I'm like, hey, I should be clearly able to pick all this up. So I started doing it, and at that point, was it I still played a lot of video games, man. I ain't gonna tell you no lies. I played a whole lot of video games, and my wife, we end up sometimes family will burn you. I don't jump to family as much to rent out my houses or whatever. But when I moved to that first house and I'm trying to do that renovation, I moved family into the other house. And so family was staying at that house, and family, kind of screwed me over, really. But it's okay. I mean, I learned my lesson. And so now moving forward, I know I won't handle family the same. Regardless of what happened at the house, I rented it out, but I didn't rent it out for way more than a mortgage. I think my mortgage was like five something, and I rented it out for like six
Okay.
fifty because I was still on the mindset of the old rent, right? It was a
Yeah.
4 bedroom, 2 bathroom house with an extra office space, walk-in closets.
So you weren't cash flowing
Was it?
anything really from that property.
No, it wasn't, man. But I fell in love with property because of the house hacking in the beginning. So
Yeah.
now I'm sitting here looking at it like, man, this ain't really doing nothing for me. And so, but I've always been saving up for property ever since, talking to that guy from college, trying to get a house early on. So I've always been putting money to the side. And so flashing forward, I wasn't cash flowing that much. And then I went to the family and I was like, hey, I got to go up on the rent because I didn't know the payment can go up on you.
Yeah.
Even though they said fixed rate, people don't know about escrow.
Yep.
Like there's an account that they make for you, basically paying your insurance and taxes typically. And because they pay your insurances and taxes, hey, after you've been in that house and you done fixed that house up and you done upgrades, your taxes are going up. If anything is going on in the community that's pumping your value of your property up, your taxes is going up. If you file an insurance claim or whatever, your insurance is going up, and at that point, escrow goes up. So at that point, my it shifted probably to like 615 because it went up like $50. So I went to the family and I was like, "Hey, I got to go up the rent $50." Man, they jumped off the wall. It was like, I should have known. This is too good to be true. You dirty. I'm leaving. And the crazy thing is, they actually left my house to go and pay more at a 2 bedroom apartment. That's
Wow.
what threw me off completely. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
man. It was so upset. They moved to Durham. In Durham, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom apartment was $850, and I was only asking to go up from the rent from 650 to 700. So it threw me off completely. And I always say, hey man, hey, a life lesson right there. Instead of giving it to me, I talk sometimes and say you're gonna give it to the man over here,
Yeah.
and so you didn't want to give me the money, you want to give somebody else the money. All right, I understand it. Go ahead and do what you do. It's okay. I'm gonna move on. So later on, I had the two properties, and so at this point, I'm like, hey, I have enough money saved up to go and buy a third property. And I want to leave the job I was working at. I wanted to leave IKEA. IKEA did me dirty. They did some discriminatory stuff towards me, and I was trying to work that out. And they basically said, the lawyer said, I got a case and everything, but I didn't know enough, and so I left them. I just went on and just left, and I said I'm gonna just leave them alone, and I went over to a company called Procter and Gamble. Procter and Gamble broke open a door that I didn't know that needed to be open, and that's when I started dabbling more into stock. And so typically, I would always save up $200 a month. I've been doing this since I was 18 to get enough money to purchase a house. And then what Ed told me, you're going to typically need somewhere in between $10,000 to $20,000 to get a house. Typically, there's some ways of getting around that, but typically that's what you're going to
Yeah.
need. If you look up the market, the average house, not saying, I know Charlotte's a whole nother ball game, but the average house is 200,000. And so being that the average house is 200,000, he said you're going to need right around 10 to 20%. So he said 10% is a solid down payment. So he was like 10 to 20,000. So I was always trying to save up to that amount. So if I had that amount, I call it house mode. So I'm in the mode buying a house at that point. Right when I get in between 10 to 20,000. So I went on and bought a property over here at no, I was looking at buying another property, but I still didn't know enough. And that debt to income ratio was hurting me bad because I had one house and my wife had one house, so I can't just go and buy a house in somebody else's name. And so that's when I found out about, hey, a lot of people don't know this about the VA loan. They think that you can only get one loan for the VA loan, but you can get multiple loans on the VA.
Yep.
And when I found out that down to the amount used to be $436,100. And when I found out, I was like, man, everybody kept telling me, no, I got to sell this house to get another house. I got to do this. So I got another VA loan. So I got two houses under the VA at this point. So flashback, I had to rent out my houses for a certain amount of time to use it as an income.
Yeah.
So the first house I had it rented out. The second house I was living in, I had that rented out for like a year and some change before they moved out, for family moved out. So I actually went over to I moved into and then
You were on mute for a second.
all right, I got
All
you.
right,
I
we hear
think
you
it's
now.
coming back in now.
Yeah.
Okay. There
All
you go.
right. They said I really like your house. I really like your house. Down to the point where it got to the point where everybody was like, how much would you rent this out to me for? I know you got one other rental property. Would you rent this one out? And I was just like, yeah, I'll rent it out. So I just fishing for numbers. I was like, it was like, how much? And I was just like throwing numbers out there because it was a two-bedroom, one-bathroom house. I mean, I was finishing the downstairs, but I was like, all right, let me get my mortgage. My mortgage was low. My mortgage was three ninety on that house. So it was a low mortgage. I only paid like 50 some thousand for it. And but was it went up in numbers now. And so I went on and took that house and I rented it out and I moved into an apartment. I had to stay in the apartment for like 9 months at least to get the other one to show the history on my taxes so I can show the banks of whoever I was getting approval from that, hey, I show an income. This is not a part of me. This is not a liability. So I learned about 80%. You got to have it at 85% of the rental will be used. So if the rents super exceed the mortgage, which I actually went up on my rents at that point to make sure. So the mortgage was 390, and I was getting 700 flat. So at that point, I was golden. I had enough. Moved out, moved into an apartment. I signed a year lease. I had to get someone to assume my lease. That was no problem. I actually did that real funny too. I actually let somebody rent out my property, and I charged them an extra $200 on renting out subleasing my apartment. And then, but the people didn't have it in contract that I couldn't sublease. I guess that's a little slight gray area, but they eventually called me. I ain't gonna tell you no lies. They called me and they was like, "Hey, you can't do this." And I was like, "Hey, I didn't know. I didn't know. I thought I could do it. I mean," and they was like, "Hey, we got to do this the right way." have him put an application in, and then have it done the right way. Well, he had just got a job as a policeman, so it worked out just well enough for him to pay me and get everything work it out with them to assume the property the apartment the regular way. And so that's when I bought my third home. I moved from Procter and Gamble to I moved from Procter from IKEA to Procter and Gamble, so I got closer. So I had some money saved up, but also I had my 401k shifting over. And when I got to Procter and Gamble, I didn't yet move it. I mean, they was calling me, shooting me letters saying I need to do something with my account, but I didn't yet move it. And that's when I started learning about stock at Procter and Gamble and how how we always save up. Yeah, I kept saying that I saved up. I kept saving. I kept saving. Well, savings takes a long time to do. I'm sure you already know. And so then I started learning about investing. So I started buying stocks here and there all the way through to actually build up the wealth that I needed to build up to get what I needed to get. And so I actually bought, but here's another ticker. I bought a house in the best neighborhood, the worst house in the best neighborhood, and it was like 176,000. And when I purchased the home, it needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
It had termite damage, all this other stuff. But after all these years of doing work for myself, I built up enough skills to do a lot of the work. So I did majority of the work. As I'm doing the work, I moved to North Carolina. The inspectors came by and I was having some work inspected, right? And it was like, the inspector for North Carolina, Rockingham County, is the inspector for everything. So he came by there to inspect one thing, and he looked around and said, "Well, you gotta get permits for the other work." I was like, "Other work? You're the electrical inspector." He's no, he said, "Here in Rockingham County, I'm the inspector of it all. You gotta pull permits for all of this." So those little hiccups right there to kind of set you back. And he allowed me to pull permits because it's my home. You can pull a lot of times in different counties, different states. You can just ask your reps for that city or state. You can pull permits yourself. And so I pulled the permits myself, got the work done, and in the progression of being there, that was my third home. And like I said, it hurts you to have so many houses in your name.
Yeah.
So at this point, financing has always been a challenge for me. And so because financing is always a challenge, I'm always going to YouTube and so many other podcasts to figure out how can I move forward. And one of the things that just kept coming out was, refinance your house. The interest rates are super low. Refinance your house, pull 50 $60,000 out of your house. I knew after I did all the work to my house, that my value of my house that went up, and the house had sold in my neighborhood for like 250,000. And the house wasn't nice at all. I mean, it was clean and everything, but it wasn't like my house, like I had done it. Granite countertops, all this other stuff, new custom cabinets. It didn't have what I had. I had tile, hardwood floors throughout the whole house, no linoleum, all that good stuff like that. Stuff that you're really trying to get the extra dollar out of your house.
Yeah.
And so me and my wife thought about it, and I was like, hey, I could pull the cash out right now and buy a house. I found the house. So I found a house in Danville, and it was for 23,000. And so I needed 50,000. I needed the money to buy it and the money to hold it. So I went on and refinanced my house. I pulled out 50 grand, and I took 23 and bought another house. That was my fourth house, and then took 30. And I guess they call that the Burr method.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Where so I bought it. I bought it with cash. Bought it straight out, and because I couldn't touch my investment money at the time, so I bought that straight on out. And after I bought that, was it I renovated it and got it rented out. So at this point, I had three rentals, and at this point, I'm starting to, really starting to feel it. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it kind of just started just going even faster. And I guess it's a snowball effect. Once you get started and once you get going, and I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Yeah.
and I was also in the method of was it Dave Ramsey, was it Money Makeover. So I'm sitting there trying to copy two different ways. Dave Ramsey like pay everything off, don't have no bills but your mortgage, but then double up on your mortgage, and after you pay off everything, start investing. Robert Kiyosaki is telling me good debt, bad debt.
Yeah.
have good debt, have an income that's bringing you in money. And so at that point, I really buckled down on the Dave Ramsey before, and now, but it wasn't getting me nowhere. It was kind of like slow. And I know sometimes you want it a little slow, but I said, man, let me bring this on home. And so that's when I went to I started doing Robert Kiyosaki. And my wife, she clinged on to Robert Kiyosaki more than she did Dave Ramsey. Because I don't think too many people in the public going to save up to buy a $40,000 car and then go out and get the car. So you don't get the car until you have all the money. So you don't get no reward. And my mom, she's big on eating the fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
So to bring it all back, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
So kind of
And so
fast forward to now. How many rental properties do you have now?
I have 16 rental properties. And was it I would have more. I bought my mom a house. That was one of my bigger dreams as I was growing up as a kid. My mom was a single mom for a long time, and because of that, you know how it is.
Yeah.
I'm always looking at my mom being there for me. She's my biggest cheerleader, was my biggest cheerleader. My wife is my biggest cheerleader now, and so she's like, hey, she wanted to buy, she wanted to get a home, so we worked out getting her a home, and that's where I'm actually at now. It's my mom's house.
Okay.
We over here. My mom's cooking and with the kids and everything and stuff like that. And she's a big help, and so past that point, I'm supposed to be on check to buy at least one or two properties every year,
Okay.
but I took a lot of my proceeds, my money. I invested in Tesla earlier this year, 10,000 into Tesla, and Tesla was at like $130, but I think I got into it when it was like at 140. I'm like slow on the draw, but I knew it was trending up, and this was earlier this year, right around March time frame, on May time frame when I invested into it, and it went up to like 270, $80. And so my 10,000 turned into like 19,000, just shy of 19,000. And so I took that money. I was like, boy, I got the money. Let's go ahead and lock this in. We get it on your credit, and we paid off a few things, and we got this house. And so my mom, we worked it out in her will that this house will go to me, later
Yeah.
on in lifetime or whatever and everything. So then that kind of set me back a little bit, but not really. I started an investment group, which we're under contract to buy another house right now. We should have that done, closed out the end of January.
So
Okay.
so have you just a few quick questions? Are all of your houses in your name, or do you have them in an LLC?
All right, so that's something I learned throughout the time. Like I was saying before, I kept putting houses in my name, and all it was doing was holding me down. I think I make a significant amount of money, but regardless of how much money you make, you can only make for so much money. And
Yeah.
even though my housing business was growing, it kept hindering my income. So at that point, I learned that, hey man, I messed up. I started buying these houses in my name. I should have been buying it in the business name the whole time. So now I have three in my name now,
Okay.
and I'm trying to transfer those over now as soon as possible. But I have was it the other 13 in my business name,
Okay. And have you
and
figured
so
is it hard to get a loan with the house in the business name, or are you paying cash for them?
all right now, so business credit. Typically, they want to see you have some skin in the game, cookie cutter, right? With a bank, they want to see you established for 2 years for your LLC. They want to see you have right around 25%. It varies with different
Yeah.
companies. They want to see a 25%, and everyone has like their minimum amount that they want to lend.
Yeah.
Like typically, I always hear the number of 50,000. We don't want to, give you anything under 50. And so I've been using I used quite a few people, quite a few companies to do things, but I also it was on one scenario I needed to do. I left Procter and Gamble and I pulled out a lot of money because I wanted to buy this seven house deal, and that was probably the one that put me under the most stress is the seven house deal.
Okay.
And so at the time, I think I had like I think I had like 10. Nope, I had 10 houses. I had 10 houses at the time. I bought 17, but I sold one to kind of clean me up and bring it back in some money because it kind of stretched me out too thin. And so the seven house deal, I pulled in some cash from the stock market. I invested, like I said, I invested in Procter and Gamble. I wrote over my 401k at one point, and I bought P&G stock directly. It was at $77 a share when I got hired in 2016, and so I bought into it, and right at the beginning of 2017, and that's when it was at 70 some dollars, $77, and so I shifted over like $22,000. And when I did that transaction, my money, the stock market hit real hard for Procter and Gamble, and it went up to like 160 some dollars. But I didn't get out then. I got out when it was like 140 something. So my money did more than double because they pay out a dividend of like right around 3%, and so it kept on growing. And when I did the seven house deal, I went to several different banks, several different. I went to Wells Fargo like I always do and get denied every time. It's real funny with Wells Fargo. I got denied by Wells Fargo several times over and over again, and I bank with them, and they see the transaction happen, which is crazy in itself. But I learned this from well, you can research anything, YouTube, a lot of podcasts like y'all's. A lot of this have raw information. So then I found out about smaller banks have an old school way of where they have the underwriters in house.
Yeah.
So if you go to a smaller banks and they'll work a little bit harder for you. So I went to a smaller bank and I was like, hey, I got seven houses I want to buy. I know hands down, this is all the work that I can do. I can get this house, I can get one of the houses to pay the whole mortgage for it all. If y'all just let me get this seven house deal. And the lady was like, what was it? You got to put down 15%. And I was like, I got 15% easy. All right, cool beans. Let's not even worry about it. And so she came back and she said, no, you was denied. And I said, what? I told you I could step it up to 20%. No, you were still denied. She couldn't even, she was so excited. She thought I was going to get approved and everything. So then that's when I went to another small bank, First Carolina Bank. First Carolina told me, hey, if you're gonna need 25%, 20%. In the midst of it, I think they was trying to get me to get out of the loan in my head too, because they came back and it was like when I saw the paperwork, it said 25%. I was like, all right, cool beans, I got it. I bought seven houses for 210,000. I only needed 25%, so that was $50,000. Boom, Procter and Gamble boosted out. I had plenty of cash, saved up to get the deal done. I was like, yes, this is in the gold. And I didn't have to leave Procter and Gamble then. So at this
Are you back now?
You back?
so it's fun. Yeah, yeah. It's funny that we say Procter and Gamble. They calling me at any time.
It's
They call they calling me now. But regardless of all of that, oh, was it so at this point I left home. I was like, hey, I ain't gotta leave, I ain't gotta do nothing. But then they came back and they told me 30%. Then they came back in the end of the contract at closing. I'm seeing paperwork at this point and they showed me 35%. So I'm like, hey, let's get them their cash. Let's go ahead and close this deal out. Because this is what a lot of people don't know. You can, once you get in a deal, yeah, it was a lot of scrutiny to get into the deal. But once you get the deal, you hold it for 6 months to a year. Now, bank terms changes. So that depending on when you hear this message, it can change at any time. But at 6 months, they would allow me that was the deal now. Now they're saying it has to be you have to hold the property for 12 months to get it refinanced. So at the time it was 6 months, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna hold this thing for 6 months and I'm gonna refinance. So whatever deal I get into, I'm gonna come back. So when the interest rates were still kind of low, it's at 4.5 interest rate. I had to drop down 35%, which it actually came to be like 38 because for some reason when you do a loan, they don't tell you about the underlying costs, and I had to come up with 81,000 to get the deal closed out. And so luckily I had a lot of cash in with the stocks that I was playing at the time, the options, the calls and everything, where I had enough. But I also had to leave Procter and Gamble to pool a lot of it. And I had to play it just right because I had to go past my vested time, and you have to be there 5 years to be able to pull it. So I was like oh man, I leave the company, but I gotta work there for. So I was actually working two full-time jobs. I was working at Procter and Gamble, and working at a place called Goodyear, and I overlapped it 2 year 2 months. So I was working two jobs. And then when I say full-time jobs, these are jobs that pull you in 60 hours each job, and I was probably working like 120 hours in a week
Wow.
just to finish it up for that last 2 months. But I closed out the deal, got to my number 17, and but it's so many things that happen in between that time.
Yeah. Now, when you get those loans from the bank, are you using the DSCR loans, or are you getting another type of loan?
All right, so with that loan, that was a business loan.
Okay.
I did use a DSCR recently. I bought a lady's house. I bought two properties from her, and it was on the same street. I had to bought them for I found her on Facebook. Right? Well, my wife, she was sick of houses at one point. She was like, I don't want to hear nothing else about a house. And I was just like, okay, I'll stop talking about houses. I ain't gonna say no else. Don't say no more. And so at one point and then my wife, she's real funny this way. She comes back like, I'm sorry, babe. Hey, here's a deal on Facebook, a lady trying to sell two houses for 55,000. So at this point, I had cashed in on Square. I invested in Square, invested like 2 grand. Square had went from like 20 or 40, in between $20 to $40 to like 60 to 80, and it went higher than that. But I got out of it, took that cash. It was like 5 or 6 grand. Dropped the down payment because she wanted 10% down.
Yeah.
Got it down to like $49,000. Dropped the 10% down payment and bought two houses from her. So I held that mortgage for a while now. And so this year, I just paid her off, and I did a DSCR loan. I have a house DSCR. My whatever mine's worked through, I got it through a company called Beeline,
Yeah.
and basically they wanted me to pay make sure my rental amount would pay out what the mortgage was. And if you have all that as proof, it works even better. But you can do it in contingency of that you will receive this rent also, and they look at the numbers. But since I already had this house rented out because I had already fixed it up in North Carolina, I own it in Reedsville. They went off my lease,
Yeah.
and so I was renting out for 750. My mortgage between the two houses was 590, and so they allowed me to refinance it. So now I own the second house free out and clear because it was a mortgage through her. But the way I tell people to do this, when you buy a house and you buying it through lease through own, if the person would swap over the deed into your name and they become a mortgager, like the lender, the primary lender on it, because they can do it just like the banks can do it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you can go back and have it refinanced. But if you do it the unorthodox way of going into a contract, you won't be able to refinance it because it would just seem as a purchase. And so I told the lady, hey, let me put the bead in my name. And she went on a string of trust, but I've done a lot of work for her. I I've did nothing but just show her clear transparency. And so she swapped the mortgage into my name last year. And then so this past August, no, it was more recent than that. Matter of fact, we just closed out on that deal probably 30 days ago or whatever, because August 26th was the year time frame. Like I said, they changed the terms. It
Yeah.
used to be 6 months hold, and they changed it to 12 months. I don't know where they're coming up with these numbers of how they switch up things, but they'll do it at the moment's notice. So make sure you're staying queued to what's going on and out there. And so I swapped it over and I used the DSCR loan that time. That was the first time I used the DSCR loan because it was talking about it all on YouTube, and I'm always going back to YouTube and TikTok now. My wife is a big fan of TikTok, of telling me how to get lending or whatever and everything. So I have used a wide range of ways. I have done a house where I bought a house straight out. I bought a house straight out. I did it that way because I did good on the stock market and I wanted to cash in and buy a house. I have done it where I used the DSCR loan. I have used FHA loan. I have used the VA loan. I have one I haven't used yet. I haven't used the USDA. But my wife, she's a real estate agent now, and she has helped a person buy a house with the USDA of kind of walking them through it or whatever and everything so they can get their approval. And so it's a lot of programs out there to using different loans, and it seems like they come up with new ones day in and day out.
Yeah.
But like I said before, financially, those different ways of life that I'm always stressing to people, I'm like, hey, all you have to do is, it's the art of just looking up at this point. And so I'm constantly looking up different ways of financing a deal.
Okay.
Kevin giving a lot of great information, man. A lot of great information.
Yeah, we definitely gonna have to bring you back for because I feel like it's so much. We've been going for about an hour now, but I feel like it's so much more information out there that we can dig deeper into. So we definitely gonna have to get you back on for another podcast. We're gonna have to make it a part 2, and shoot, it might even be a
Part
part
three,
3 and
because we
4,
got to talk about the
depending on
investment
Yeah,
group.
how deep we go.
We got to talk about the investment
Yeah.
group. We got to
So
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about,
hands down.
working 9 to 5s and being a business owner as far as like doing the renovations yourself, all the work you do. So we got to get you back on. Like he said, part 2, part 3,
yeah.
Yeah.
maybe 4 and 5.
Yeah, we definitely
All right,
appreciate
all
you.
right.
We definitely appreciate you coming onto the podcast and just dropping some knowledge. Like we all, we always try to bring people on here that has knowledge that other people in our community can use, and this is definitely some of it because a lot of people are trying to get into the rental game, and a lot of people don't know how it works, don't know how to get started, don't know how to fund those rental properties. So definitely think you dropped a lot of good information that can they definitely help people
Yes,
out.
sir. Yep.
Yeah, hands down. Hands down.
And as we've been running this podcast for a little over a year now, and every time before we get off, we always tell people this is more than a podcast. We handing out
And them
crowns.
out.
All right, all right,
Hand them out.
all right. All right, so hopefully
You
one
got
day
the
I earn
crown.
my crown, right?
Hey, you definitely
You
earned
earned
it
it today.
today.
Yep.
Definitely.
All right,
We
all right, good
appreciate
stuff,
you.
good stuff. All right, man.
Who the lover, who the hate? Who the realest in my circle? Who the one who be the snakes? Who gon' fold up under pressure? Who gon' understand the stakes? Who gon' wait to get they food to try to take from off my plate? Who the love? Who gon' understand I'm hurt? Who gon' love me unconditionally and try and make it work? Who gon' party once I'm gone and shed a tear once I'm in dirt? I ain't asking for too much, I'm trying to understand my